Hi everyone. I want to begin this presentation by thanking each of you for serving on my dissertation committee. And also I want to thank you for tuning in to my Prospectus defense. It is entitled A Mixed Method Study on the Impact of Hybrid Biological Labs on College Students' Achievement, Aptitudes, and Attitudes. Here's an outline of what I'll be discussing, starting with a quick background and literature review. That will be followed by the theoretical framework, the research questions and their significance, and then ending with the research design as a way of answering the questions and data analysis. But first, I want to tell you a little story. In summer of 2017, Alcorn State University decided to shut down the Math and Science building due to renovations of the air conditioning unit. Now, this meant that all the math and science courses would have to be relocated. Due to lack of space on campus, not only did all biology course lectures have to be conducted online, but labs had to be conducted online as well. Now, we all know that labs are where students make meaningful connections to the content and concepts taught in the biology lecture course. So, knowing this, I decided to research the statistics on online courses and the influence of virtual science labs on student learning. I even went as far as conducting a meta analysis, and I found out that although students have a lesser performance in these virtual labs, they do not necessarily present a lesser experience. Due to the many technological advances in today's world, many colleges and universities are incorporating online education into their programs with a 17% increase in enrollment from 2008 to 2009. As a matter of fact, 28.5% of higher education students were enrolled in online courses in fall of 2014. 29.8% were enrolled in fall of 2015, and 31.7% were enrolled in fall of 2016. So as you can see, the percentage of students enrolling in online courses are gradually increasing with each year. And although online courses are credited for their flexibility, especially for non-traditional students, students with families, and students that actually go out and work each and every day, they tend to emit a poor performance. They tend to lack peer-to-peer interaction. They lack collaboration and student-teacher interaction as well as inquiry. Because of this, many universities are starting to lean towards a newer practice such as hybrid labs. Now, you all may be thinking, what exactly is a hybrid lab? Well, a hybrid lab is a combination of both traditional and virtual modalities. Hybrid labs go by many names, including blended learning, web enhanced learning, and mediated learning. Not only are hybrid labs flexible, but they promote active participation, collaboration. They help improve academic performance and engagement. Not to mention, the hybrid lab environment presents teachers with the possibility to actually give adequate feedback and direct help to students when needed. So essentially, it's thought that the hybrid lab environment presents you with the best of both worlds. Now, the problem is that only a very few studies focus on the impact of hybrid labs on student achievement or measure their attitudes or their satisfaction of these courses. Simply put, there are no studies providing a mixed method approach of the impact of hybrid biology labs. And I, for one, feel that with a widespread of these labs being offered, it's important to research their effectiveness. Now, throughout this presentation, you may actually hear me use the terms satisfaction, attitudes, and motivation interchangeably. They are synonymous to each other, so they mean the exact same thing for purposes of this research. Now, this research is significant because the lab environment and students' attitudes toward the environment can affect how well they do in the course. This study can help educators understand the experiences of their students enrolled in the labs, as well as give us as educators a set of tools for evaluating hybrid labs. And that brings us to the purpose of this research. So, what I want to do is to examine the academic achievements, aptitudes, and attitudes of freshman biology students by way of their pre-test scores, post-test scores, final grades, and interviews. I will be answering 5 research questions. Research question 1: how does learning outcomes differ between traditional, virtual, and hybrid labs? Research question 2: how do pre and post test scores differ amongst the 3 lab environments? Research question 3: what's the correlation between students' aptitudes and achievement? Number 4: what are the experiences of students enrolled in these different labs? And research question number 5 is: does the attitudes of students differ depending on the environment they're subjected to? This research stems from 3 theoretical frameworks: the social cognitive theory, constructivist theory, and the motivation to learn theory. The social cognitive theory states that behavior is dependent on the interaction between individual characteristics and the environment. Therefore, I'm going to examine the influence of the environment on students' achievement and their attitudes. From this diagram, you can also see that a student's scores and attitudes can influence their reaction in the environment. It can also influence personal characteristics such as course selection and major. And likewise, individual characteristics can influence a student's actions in the learning environment. However, you'll notice that the arrow is not bi-directional between individual characteristics and the learning environment. So this arrow goes in only one direction. And that reason for that is because the environment does not directly affect individual characteristics. This theory also states that students engage in a self-regulating system that affects their attitudes or their motivation towards learning biology. This system consists of 5 concepts. Concept 1 is intrinsic motivation, in which students perform for personal fulfillment in the environment. Concept 2 is extrinsic motivation, in which students perform for a reward. Goal orientation is simply when students set particular goals. Self-determination is when the student believes that they have control over their own learning, and self-efficacy is a concept in which the student believes that they can actually perform a duty effectively. The constructivist theory states that learning is an active process and new concepts are constructed from past and current knowledge and their interaction with the environment. Constructivist learning is inquiry-based and student-centered, and it involves a hands-on learning environment. It involves experimentation, collaboration, and problem solving in which the student is going to guide their own learning. And lastly, the motivation to learn theory is geared solely towards attitudes. It's broken down into 4 distinct themes. The methodological approach looks at the application of a new intervention, such as various lab environments, which would actually be the case in this research study. And it also looks at the correlation between attitudes, achievements, and the environment. The motivation to learn across populations theme states that not many studies of motivation have been conducted on collegiate students, and there is also a decline in motivation in biology courses from elementary to high school. The learning environment and its influences simply states that students' experiences can be strongly influential on their learning outcomes. And then lastly, the theoretical approach is broken down into the achievement goal theory, self-determination theory, and the social cognitive theory. And the achievement goal theory states that students are either mastery goal oriented or performance goal oriented. The self determination theory states that students are intrinsically motivated or extrinsically motivated. And then the social cognitive theory, which was just previously explained 2 slides ago, states that the environment has a direct influence on students' attitudes and how well they actually perform throughout the course. But please take notice that the theoretical approach of the motivation to learn theory actually overlaps 3 of the 5 concepts of the social cognitive theory. So the research design for this study will utilize a mixed methods embedded design in which the qualitative strand is embedded within the quantitative design as a means for enhancement. So students will take a pre-test at the beginning of the semester. They will undergo one of the 3 biology lab environments. So either they'll enroll in a traditional, a virtual, or a hybrid lab. And then they're going to follow up these labs with a post test at the end of the semester. And at that time, the qualitative data will be collected by way of personal interviews. And then both the quantitative and the qualitative strands will be integrated to determine the effectiveness of the lab environment on students' outcomes and their attitudes. So my sample would consist of freshman biology students at Alcorn State University with a sample size of 102 students minimum, and this was determined by Cohen's power. The plan is to have at least 34 students in each of the 3 lab environments. Upon IRB approval, students will take a pretest to determine their aptitudes. They will then undergo one of the 3 lab environments throughout the remainder of the semester and take a post-test at the end of the semester. Now, the post-test will have the same questions as the pretest, but students won't know this as they're taking the pretest. The test actually consists of 20 multiple choice questions, and this has already been deemed reliable based on KR20 with an alpha of 0.695. Research questions 1 through 3 will be answered by quantitative measures, and research questions 4 through 5 will be answered through qualitative measures. Research question 1 will be answered by students' final grades in the course. Research question 2 will be answered by pre and post test scores, and research question 3 will utilize data from pre-test and overall final grades. As I stated, questions 4 and 5 are parts of the qualitative strand, so they're going to be utilizing personal interviews and observational data. All quantitative data will be analyzed through SPSS software. So I'm going to run an ANOVA to answer research questions 1 and 2, since I'm comparing means from 3 separate environments. And then I'll run a regression to answer research question 3. Now, the reason I'm running a regression is that not only am I interested in the correlation between aptitude and achievements, but I'm also interested in predicting achievement from the students' pretest when they actually enter into the lab. I will utilize 9 students for the qualitative strand. So I'll be taking 3 students from each lab environment, and these students will be selected based on their aptitude scores. So students that scored low, medium, and in the high ranges. I will observe these students throughout the semester, paying special attention to the way that they interact in the environment. I would then put each student through a series of open-ended interview questions while audio recording them. And then the way I'm going to analyze the qualitative strand is by firstly transcribing students' responses verbatim. And then I'm going to create a list of common statements and divide those statements into themes. So these themes should parallel with the concepts of the social cognitive theories. So those concepts such as intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation and goal orientation and so forth and so on. And then I will triangulate observational data with interview data to form a structural description. And then lastly, I'm going to form a composite description. And what I'm expecting to see for this research is for the most effective environment to have the highest achievement mean. I also expect to see the environment with students having the highest aptitudes to actually have the highest pretest means. And hopefully there's a relationship between aptitudes and achievements, meaning what students coming to the course already knowing should predict how well they do throughout the course. Of course, this is if the environment is effective or not. So simply put, if achievement increases as aptitude increases, then the relationship would be considered a positive one. And from the interviews, I'm looking to see exactly how students felt about each environment. The statements they make concerning their attitudes should give some enlightenment as to why they perform the way they perform throughout the course. And this is going to conclude my presentation. If you have any questions, comments, or recommendations, please don't hesitate to send them as a reply all through email. I'm looking forward to hearing from each of you, and I hope you have a lovely day.